Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Mega Man 3 for DOS, brought to us by Capcom and Hi-Tech Expressions. This is the second game for DOS that Hi-Tech Expressions put out for DOS computers. They didn't make a Mega Man 2. And just like Mega Man 1 for DOS, it doesn't feature any of the Robot Masters from any of the console versions of the game, as well as it features different graphical style and a little bit different gameplay overall. It also sports some pretty awful controls and overall a pretty bad experience to play through. So here we go with Mega Man 3 for DOS. When you start up the game, you can actually select a few options. We're going to be changing the graphics cards over the EGA so we have the most and best color overall. Turn off the joystick option. You have a few other settings that honestly, I can't really figure out if they actually do anything as far as the game is concerned. Once you start up the game, you have the Hi-Tech Expressions logo. You can then boot up the next logo, and then after that, you get to your main title screen for the game. Here we have Mega Man 3 1992 by Capcom. I'm sure Capcom really doesn't want their name anywhere on this game. However, once you press fire, you go to your actual robot selection screen, and here you have your Robot Masters, and there's 6 of them to choose from. Bit, Shark, Wave, Oil, Blade, and Torch. Interesting to note that a couple of these would actually make a later appearance in other Mega Man titles. Of course, they are nothing like they are in this game. You can also look at the Robot Masters and easily see that all they did was take Robot Masters from other Mega Man games and actually edit the sprite of them in order to make them look like a different Robot Master altogether. Now we're starting off with Wave Man. Now for your basic controls, you have your jump, which is actually J, and spacebar for firing. Honestly, it can get pretty difficult at first learning those controls because of the weird finger placement that you're going to have to put on your keyboard. Now, I am far from an expert at this game. The hit detection in the game can be a little bit off at times, as well as you will find yourself getting constantly bombarded by different enemies. Each of the levels also has multiple branching paths. Now, there's only one end goal to end up going to, but it seems like there's a couple of ways to get there, at least in some of the levels. One of your biggest enemies is going to be the machines in the background. There's 2 types of these machines. The ones that shoot out a giant pink ball at you, these fire in different directions, and then you have the ones that fire a laser shot in at you. This one bounces around the room in a couple of different angles before disappearing. These are going to get in your way all the time, knocking you off of platforms, knocking you through platforms, and just generally being a nuisance. Now, there may be a death or two in this run of the game just because of its unrelenting nature, and I honestly am not a full-time expert at Mega Man 3 for DOS. The paths I'm going to be taking in each level may not even be the best paths to take. These are the paths that I decided to take that I felt were the best for me as far as being able to get through, though I will still make a mistake or two, and sometimes it's pretty easy to actually run in a circle during this level. The worst thing about the guns, like I said though, is they can knock you through platforms. So if you're standing on one, you get hit by some of the guns in the game, you'll just fall right through the platform. The other thing is though, there's only a handful of enemies in the game itself, so getting used to those enemies and their patterns actually isn't too difficult. It's just actually being able to hit the enemies without taking damage is the one part that gets really difficult. We eventually drop down into this pipe, and we can take out a couple of Sniper Joes in this pipe. Continue moving forward just a little bit and jumping over their fire the best you can in order to keep launching in a few shots at them. In this game, like the first Mega Man for DOS, you can actually keep hitting a guy multiple times with shots. There is no invulnerability for the enemies, so just keep launching shot after shot into them. Here we battle the first of the Robot Masters in the game, and this is Wave Man. Wave Man, like almost all the Robot Masters in the game, have basically the same pattern. They jump from left to right and right to left, doing a couple of different jumps, either a short jump or a giant jump, in which case either one you can actually run underneath of them while they're doing it. Wave Man, every couple of jumps, will stop in mid-air and throw out a whole bunch of little bombs all around him. Of course, we want to be out of the reach of these bombs as best as possible, and of course the farther he's up in the air, the farther the bombs will spread across the ground. We'll just keep hitting him multiple times with that Mega Buster over and over again, and eventually though he will explode and go down, and we'll actually get his ability and move on to the next master. Next up is Torchman. Now start off this level by dropping down and going to the pipe at the bottom, then immediately turning left and going through this pipe. If you end up going through all those other areas, you're probably going to end up running in a circle, so just go down first. Wait for the right opportunity here to try to jump through these hallways and avoid as much of this fire as possible, though it's impossible not to take some damage, it seems like. The worst amount of damage that you can take, though, is from actually running into enemies. Projectile fire from enemies in the game won't bother you or damage you too badly. However, it's actually just flat out running into an enemy that will take out a good chunk of your health, including about a quarter of your health from certain enemies that you can run into. These guys are some of the worst offenders. When they see you, of course, they'll just fire out their normal projectile shot, which won't hurt you too badly. However, if they run into you, a quarter of your health will probably go away if they end up hitting you. Drop down here and then go to the next pipe to the left, but be sure to hug the right wall so you can land on the platform. When you make it into this room, you'll have to wait for the fire to go by and then time it correctly so you can jump over to the platform on the far right. Once here, climb up the next ladder and take out the Sniper Joe. This guy will probably hit you once or twice, and the thing about it is, though, you will end up getting an E-Tank if you hug the right wall. E-Tanks make their first appearance in the DOS series. Well, their only appearance, since thankfully this was the last of the classic Mega Mans on DOS. Just like with other Mega Man games, the E-Tank is very useful as it'll replenish your entire health bar, and definitely we will be using it in this run of the game. After climbing up a whole lot of platforms, watching out for all the gunfire, we walk into another hallway with a Sniper Joe and some more waterfalls. Run through here and drop down, and be sure to hug the right wall once again. This way you can land on at least this platform here. Either platform is fine because you'll be going to the next one right above it by climbing up the ladder on the far right. Repeat the process by going up the next ladder and enter the boss chamber. We will be switching to his weakness though, which is the wave ability, whichever that is, and we'll be using that here against, of course, Torchman, who you battle in a room full of water. Why he's in a sewer system to begin with, why is he in a room full of water, and he's, of course, a fire-based Robot Master, I will never understand. Obviously, these Robot Masters are part of the Defective series. Either way, we get the Torch Arm for defeating him, and we move on to the next Robot Master. Next up, though, we're going to be choosing Bitman. Now, Bitman is one of the tougher Robot Masters to deal with only because his level is difficult to get through. He actually is one of the few Robot Masters that also has a slightly different pattern to deal with than the other ones. At the beginning of this level, we're going to drop down here and go through this door. Work your way up by climbing up the ladders, watching out for the gunfire from this guy here so you can make it up to this platform. Thankfully, on this platform, you can just do little short jumps to take out the guy on the next one. If you're lucky, of course, some enemies will drop health in the game, but don't rely on it because they don't drop a whole lot, it seems like. After falling in the lava a bunch of times, I end up finally getting through the door. The bee enemies are some of the more annoying ones, but thankfully in this level, we don't really have to deal with them. Go through the next door at the very bottom and jump over each of the platforms so you can make it over here. Once over here, wait for the gunfire to go by, if possible, and try to get through this door over on the right. Here we're introduced for the mosquito enemy for the first time, and these guys only take one shot, but they fly around the room like a giant nuisance and can easily get in the way. Here, unfortunately though, I have my first death as I make a jump over the platform but end up getting hit by the dripping water or oil, and I end up losing a life. Though, unfortunately, it's not too difficult to end up losing a life on that part just because it's so hard sometimes to dodge the dripping. Because the dripping not only will get you while it's coming down, when it lands on the ground it doesn't dissipate right away, so if you're not careful you'll end up walking into it. In the next area, climb all the way up through the room and then drop all the way back down. Watch out for this guy at the bottom so that you can make it to the next ladder. Here you'll have a room full of more fire at the bottom and another one of the things shooting at you non-stop. This guy will seemingly get you from all angles. It doesn't matter what angle you're standing at, half the time these guns will end up shooting you. Slowly make your way over these platforms if possible, once again watching out for the gunfire, but as you can see when you land on a platform you get shot, you end up dropping down below. I highly recommend taking out the mosquito enemy if possible before making it to the next platforms. If for some reason after multiple attempts you actually can't get a shot in on, which sometimes this happens because they'll be out of your range of fire, just end up skipping them and try to do your best to move along the platforms. After one more room of fire, when you make it here, immediately drop down below. Don't try to do a jump over to the right or try to be fancy with it and end up missing the platform that's just directly below you. Then do some short, quick jumps over all the platforms to make it over to some more ladders. Climb up the long ladder on the far left side and make it to the boss chamber at the very top. Now it's time to battle the boss, and for Bitman, we're going to be using Torchman's ability. For this guy, all you have to do is wait for him to throw out his lightning at you, and when he does that, you'll actually be able to finally attack him. Immediately after he fires the lightning, fire a couple of shots, jump over the lightning, and then finish him off with a couple more shots from the torch. Once he's defeated, we get the Bit Cannon. We now have half of the Robot Masters defeated in Mega Man 3 for DOS. Next up, though, we're going to be selecting Blade Man. Now for Blade Man, you would think it would be some kind of castle or sword-based level. Well, you know, since we had a Blade Man actually in a newer Mega Man game that came out much later. However, for this Blade Man, we have a giant water-themed level. Now, the creators of this game did something new with Mega Man, and that was give him the ability to swim. It's definitely a little bit clunky and feels like you're actually floating on ice, kind of, and slipping and sliding all around, but at least they tried something new. However, they initiated this new addition by having it in pretty much every level in the game in some way, shape, or form. Almost all Blade Man's level is underwater, so you'll have to be very careful while traveling through here and get used to the swimming mechanics pretty quickly. While you're swimming, though, you have very limited control, as like I said, it really feels like you're moving on ice. Coming to a complete stop while swimming can be difficult, and you'll find yourself running into an enemy a lot of the times. The path I am taking once again is probably the quickest and best path that I could come up with in order to get through this. If you need some help, you can try to get up there and take out that Sniper Joe for it, but I end up finding myself running out of more health by doing that. Plus, there's another big large chunk of health down here if you need that one as well. Either way, with the E-Tank that we gathered just a little bit ago at the beginning of the stage, we're just going to ignore both of the large pieces of health and continue on through the level. When you make it up here, watch out for the Fishman. This guy is pretty much the same as the guys in the hazard suits, except they actually don't have a projectile, they just try to run into you, but they do a lot of damage if they do. Up here, you'll notice the game will actually slow down a little bit while you're trying to jump from these platforms. All the graphical power of the waterfalls in the background mixed with everything else is a little bit too much for this game to handle, as it will slow down a bit, so be careful with your jumping. You'll also see this later on in another level, so you'll have to be careful and time your jumps even more precisely while dealing with this. When you make it here, watch out for the gun the most that you can, and jump up immediately to the next platform, and then make a far leap over to the left for the next set. Then you have a choice of two ladders, and choose the right ladder seems to be the right one to go to in order to continue on in the level. Travel along the upper platform so you can make it over to another ladder on the very far left. Watch out for the weird duck-like monster on this platform here that we saw a little bit earlier in the other sewer-based level that we went to. Take out this guy from this platform here before trying to jump over to the gap in the left wall. Getting up here will be a little bit of a pain, but thankfully there's a large chunk of health. Unfortunately, I had to use my E-tank though before I was able to get to it. Over here you have a couple of different paths to take. I'll be taking the bottom path here so I can make it through, watching out for more guns, and then of course climbing up another large ladder. Take out the Venus flytrap enemies before moving on to the left. Once you make it up this ladder though, you'll have to go around a little bit, but you'll eventually land in some more water. Here, watch out for the sea anemone or whatever it is on the bottom of the water here before trying to go past it and up. This can be rather difficult because just standing on the bottom of the ocean, you won't be able to actually hit it with your gunfire. Instead, you'll have to just float just barely in order to get up high enough in order to hit it. Now, when you make it up here, you'll have to once again switch over to your ability. This time we'll be using the Bit weapon in order to take on Blade Man. Now, unfortunately, you can only have one lightning bolt out at a time, so if the lightning is still traveling, you won't be able to hit him. This guy does the same thing as every other robot master just about, as he'll bounce around the room, eventually firing out a few blades. Keep hitting with the lightning when you can, and you'll easily defeat him, once again getting a new ability, this time the Blade Launcher. Next up, it's Oil Man. Now, Oil Man is probably one of my least favorite levels in this whole game. For some reason, while practicing, this is the level that gave me easily the most amount of trouble. Travel along the upper pipes, and you can take out these weird giant cobra ant-like creatures with just a single shot, so they aren't too much of a threat. There's also a lot of dead ends in this level, it seems like, all throughout the pipe work. You can climb up here, even though I don't really need it. You can climb up here in order to get a large chunk of health, in case you did run low on health already at this point in the level, which honestly wouldn't surprise me with some of the enemies that are throughout this place. Here though, we'll climb up the next ladder, watching out for more dripping oil and lava everywhere, and jump up to the upper left, taking out another one of those weird cobra ant hybrids before making it to this platform. Take out this guy first. Then you'll have the floating bug enemy that will try to hit you as well. Take this guy out before attempting to climb the ladder on the far right side. This guy will easily, almost always, knock you off the platforms or knock you off the ladders if you attempt to do this before you end up taking him out. So it's just much easier to take some damage and finish him off. At this point in the game though, you may be wondering, hey, why not use the other abilities? They gotta help out, right? Well, honestly, they don't. Now, granted, maybe each enemy in the game does have a weakness overall, but after doing several attempts and trying to use the different weapons against different creatures in the game, I found them to be almost no use, and that the Mega Buster still ends up being the best weapon because you can keep firing it at a faster rate than any of the other weapons in the game. So, while in the end they may do more damage overall, the thing about it is, the Mega Buster still fires so much faster, and with no invulnerability for enemies, just easier to use that. When you make it here, take out some more of these hazard suit guys. There's 2 on this platform. Then when you make it up the next one, you can actually go into this little cave on the left side and take out the next one by just doing little short jumps, and his fire won't be able to hit you. Thankfully for us though, he does drop a little bit of health, so that will definitely help us as we make it to the later part of this level. When you get down here, take out another one of these hazard guys and watch out for the Matul. The Matuls are some of the more powerful enemies in the whole game, as amazing as that is. They of course pop up just like any Matul and fire a shot at you, which you can jump over. However, they take a ton of shots from your Mega Buster in order to finally get rid of them. Once they're done, head up a little bit, but then continue on the downward path. Eventually you'll be able to drop down in this place below. When in here, you'll have to watch out for some guns being shot at you from below, as well as another one of those mosquito-like enemies flying around, so be sure to hit him before attempting to make the jumps. Even with him done though, the gun will still probably hit you at least once and knocking you down to the oil below. You'll have to do the same here, but thankfully there's no gun, but the mosquito will definitely get in the way. Make these last couple of jumps and you make it to the boss chamber. Be sure to equip Blade Man's ability, which is actually L in your menu, and fire it at him. Thankfully, if you fire at him really closely, you'll be able to hit him with all 3 blades you fire out at once, destroying his health, and it'll only take 2 or 3 hits at most in order to get rid of Oil Man. Once he's done, you get the Oil Stream arm attachment, and we move on to the final Robot Master of the game. The final Robot Master we're going to be taking on in Mega Man 3 for DOS is Sharkman, easily the most interesting and honestly the more creative of the Robot Masters in the game. Also, easily my favorite level in this game. I actually don't mind playing this level, as amazing as that is. Of course, being Sharkman, it's completely underwater, but one of the cool things is you start off by swimming down on the lower right side, and you can enter inside of a giant sunken ship. There's an actually pretty cool design here, and it actually looks like they completely took out some of the graphics from Capcom's other classic, The Little Mermaid. While swimming around in here, watch out for the different fish that are going to be kind of latched on to different parts of the level while traveling over to the left side. Over here, you can travel downwards in order to collect some item in the lower right corner if you would like, or you can immediately exit the ship over to the left side. While traveling down here, make your way through these tunnels, and through these caves it can definitely be tricky and you may find yourself going in a circle. Unfortunately for me, sometimes I even end up going in a circle, and I thought I actually knew my path through this a couple of times. The only thing annoying while swimming through these tunnels is that if you get too close to the ground, you do end up stopping and actually standing on top of the ground. You'll have to, of course, do a jump into the air in order to actually continue floating. All the way down here, unfortunately, is a dead end, but this is actually one of 2 times you will end up seeing that during this run, because I accidentally do a little bit of circling around and end up going back into a hallway that I didn't need to, unfortunately. Here is a pretty cool big open area. There's some nice graphical stuff going on into the background. Over here in the lower left corner, if you want some extra health, you can try to fight this creature off and try to get back around. I recommend just trying to swim past him, because if you try to stand on the same ground with him and try to keep firing at him, you end up taking more damage than it ends up being worth. Down into the lower right corner is actually where we need to go. Above here, though, is an E-tank, and unfortunately I get a little bit turned around here and end up traveling to the top part of this area again, in which case I go a little bit in a circle for a couple seconds. While traveling through, you can see that I end up making a big loop around by trying to take the upper cave path, and instead I really need to just continue over to where I was, but back into that lower right corner. So after coming down here, I realized that, yep, this is actually where I've already been before, so I'll use the E-Tank to replenish my health, and now head back to the little area that I already traveled through. Unfortunately, I meet up with this guy again as I take the lower path, even though I should have just continued going straight. But eventually, though, we come back out into the big open area, and this time, I can finally head into that lower right corner area that I bypassed last time and caused me to go into a circle. Though, it's a little bit actually tricky to go to the bottom here, as the seaweed will try to get in your way. But, here we go, we're actually able to finally get down here, and now we can start heading back north. Go up through this little hallway, watching out for the two fish against the walls, and eventually you'll come into a more open area once again. Out here, just travel all the way to the left, watching out for the enemies. Eventually you'll run into a building. When you do so, just travel a little bit down the building, and you'll eventually make it to the boss door. Now it's time to battle Sharkman, and for Sharkman we're going to be of course using Oilman's ability that we got in the previous level. Now for Sharkman, he has the same abilities and everything that the other Robot Masters have. Jump a little bit, throw out his weapon, and then continue repeating the process. Thankfully it only takes a couple of shots with the oil ability to get rid of him, and we get the Shark Boomerang. With that now in hand, we have only one more level left to go to, and that of course is Dr. Wily's castle itself. Now, being Dr. Wily's castle, of course, this is going to be the longest stage in the game, as well as the more difficult stages, because there's a lot of instant death here. All the green acid slime is actually an instant death, so you have to be very careful not to get knocked back into pits during this level. Here we also have to rematch against all the Robot Masters, so we start off with Bitman, so we'll get out Torchman's ability, wait for him to fire that lightning at us, and then hit him a few times with it in order to get rid of him. Once Bitman is done, we travel out of his lair and we head over to the left after climbing up these ladders. During this little segment, it can be difficult to make it through because of so many of those bouncing gun cannons that are against the wall. Just try to get through, taking as least amount of damage as you can, but I don't think there's any way to get through that area without taking some damage. Up here we battle another one of those giant Batuls. Jump in between the two spread shot that he ends up firing out, and do your best to keep hitting him over and over. After about 1,000 shots, he will finally go down and we can actually move on. After avoiding one more gun if possible, we run back into Sharkman, and just like last time, we're going to be using Oilman's ability to try to get rid of him. Watch out for the Shark Boomerang if he's able to get that out, but thankfully, even if he ends up getting one of his shots out, it's instantly destroyed once you actually destroy the boss itself. You'll be blasted all the way to the top of this area through this weird looking tube thing, and then you'll be in a more open room. Here, though, you can actually travel into the upper right corner of the room in order to grab yourself an item. The upper left ladder is where you need to go, so if you have plenty of health and don't want to risk anything, you can just continue on the stage by going through the upper left ladder. Unfortunately, though, for me, I'm going to decide to try to go into the upper right corner and get that item, but unfortunately I will end up making a mistake while doing this, and instantly falling into the acid and losing a life. After losing a life and battling another one of these hazard guys, you can see that only thing over here is a big large piece of health. Once I have that, I'm going to carefully platform back over the acid and go back over to the upper left side and go up that ladder that I mentioned earlier. Here's where the platform gets a little bit tricky, as of course if you fall at any point during this platforming you will instantly lose a life, and the game does have some slowdown during the segment, so you have to be even more cautious. Here we battle with Wave Man, and we use the Shark Boomerang to help us out during this fight that we didn't have the first time we battled him. And after 4 or so of those, he's done and we continue on. Thankfully, once you get past a couple of those hazard guys, you'll be in a nice area where you don't have to worry about the acid below you, but you do have to be cautious of the guns as they will knock you off of any platform or ladder while you're trying to climb up. If you're able to make it to the top of the ship though, you can head off to the left and drop down and enter the next boss chamber, a rematch against Oil Man. So we'll get out the blade weapon and end up hitting him just a couple of times. Thankfully up close we can easily get rid of his health, and he's done. Here we have some more platforming with the acid below us, and you'll actually have a lot of these platforms for the rest of the level, so get used to jumping to them. Thankfully though, they're a little bit bigger than just the singular platform, so it is a tad easier in order to make it through this area. Over to the right, we end up rematching with Blade Man, so we get out Bitman's lightning move in order to help us out, hit him 4 times with it to get rid of him, and move on. We now have only one more Robot Master to rematch before we actually make it to the final bosses of the game. If you're getting a little bit low on health and you're pretty good at dodging the guns and the walls, you can work your way up here, trying to do your best to avoid all the fire. Take out the hazard suit guy who's sitting on this platform, and then in the lower right corner of this area, you'll find a large piece of health to help replenish some of the energy you may have been losing. When you make it back down, keep going down the ladders to another set of platforms that you'll have to jump in between, watching out for the acid below. Here you'll have to make one of the trickier jumps there in the game by making a nice long jump over between those two, and then climb up this ladder and then drop down the next. When you make it down this one though, it's time for the final bosses of the game. First, we rematch with the last of the Robot Masters, being Torch Man, so we get out Wave Man's ability in order to take him out, and then we enter a small chamber in between the final Robot Master and the actual final boss. Be sure that you replenish, if you can, your lightning move, as well as your wave move, and your torch move. Use the lightning bolt to jump up in the air and watch out for the giant mech that slowly walks towards you. You may run low on the lightning while doing this, but be sure you can climb up and grab a little bit item replenishment in order to finish off the giant mech above you. The giant mech is just the first of 3 final bosses, but thankfully the last 2 are actually easier than he is. Be sure to have full wave as well as shark ability. Then enter the boss chamber. Using the wave move, attack the giant machine in the center with all the acid. Of course, jumping on the acid will be an instant death, and you'll have to do your best to keep avoiding all the nuclear rods that keep bouncing all around. After just a few hits though with the wave move, he'll go to his final form. Equip the Shark Boomerang and attack Dr. Wily every time he comes out of the acid. It won't take too many of these, and if you have a full bar of shark ability, you should be able to finish off Dr. Wily before you end up running out. Though if you do run out, of course, just pull out the Mega Buster in order to finish him off. And then you get to see the great ending to Mega Man 3 for DOS. And here it is. Dr. Wily has surrendered, Mega Man has saved the planet from destruction, but will it last? You then get your credits, and it's almost an exact duplication of the ending to the first Mega Man DOS game. After pressing the fire button that it tells you to there, it just literally exits out of DOS, and if you really wanted to, you could enter the command and start the game all over again. But that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.